welcome on Primetime, and I know it's been quite a while we haven't had a new edition, but I have to be honest, and I've been quite busy with the massive project with Horrorpedia and the Mac project, but I will get back on this a little bit later, not in this show, but in a future video. Anyhow, today we have the pleasure of having Lex Stolk with us from Fratello Watches.
Thank you.
And we're going to go over some of the main news that has happened over the last few months, over the beginning of the year. And let's jump right into it.
Yes, that's a nice little bridge. Jump into it, yeah.
Exactly, because we're going to talk jumping hours indeed.
Hours.
I mean, both of us, we were recently invited to AP's social club. And one of the main watches that they introduced was this new jumping hour. And we've seen quite a few of these jumping hours over the last few months.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a kind of a trend with this?
Yeah, you could say it's a trend. You could also say that it's a cosmic coincidence that this is happening. But I think that most attention went, of course, to the Cartier Tank à Guichet. Mm-hmm. That tiny little thing that was not really like the Mapiguet that we saw. That was actually very well, very easy to read. That the tank is more of an objet d'art or something. It's very difficult to read, but maybe that's my poor eyesight.
And definitely, I mean, the Cartier version, you really have to be careful when you wear it because you're going to scratch it somewhere.
Oh yeah, you're going to scratch the top. Yeah.
It's absolutely beautifully executed, but indeed it could be problematic wearing it. But personally, I really liked it. But this one, you won't have any issues at all because I mean, with this full sapphire.
Exactly. Yeah. It was also quite large.
Yes.
Yeah. That was one of the main concerns for many. On the other hand, I have to say I had it on my wrist, and I also saw a wrist shot of myself with the watch, and I thought it's actually it's a pretty nice watch.
Yeah, and what was interesting is that I mean it's going to be part of a new collection. Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to see much more iterations coming within the next few months or at least year.
Yeah, AP is going to rival Lange's Zeitwerk, which is to me is more. No, it's not the original digital mechanical wristwatch, of course, but it is one that has been around for quite a while, and nobody followed that trend back then.
Yeah.
But that was probably also maybe because they kind of took the clock in the Zemper Oper as an example, so it was a very unique design.
Yeah, but indeed, quite different. There you really have even digital minutes. Because generally in all the watches that we mentioned before, you have trading minute disc.
Yeah. And there were quite a few. We talked about
the
Chrono
Swiss,
before.
Yeah, Bremont, Chrono Swiss. Now we have the Niton coming up also. I mean, there's a few of these pieces, and I don't know to what extent. I mean, the fact of having this kind of digital display of the hour has a little, it's got something to do with people appreciating reading digital time, for instance, on your phone or something like that. If it makes it more easier to read and it brings a little something gimmicky, going back to an electronic device.
I wonder if there was going to be a customer who will step into, let's say he makes an appointment at an AP house and he says, now finally I can buy a watch that I can read like my computer. I find that very hard to believe, but I like the nice philosophical connotation. So I grant you that. So, yeah.
I mean, there are less and less people today within the younger generation that are capable of reading time with an analog way. With hands, they're completely lost. There was a survey in Switzerland. There was the percentage of kids not being able to read the time was actually really, really high, which is kind of surprising. You really take it for granted, but no, this is actually cumbersome for some to read time on a display.
So you actually predict that in 10 years, maybe 20 years time, all mechanical watches are digital watches?
No, I don't think so. No.
That's a comforting thought.
But that means that absolutely. But that means that we need to participate in educating in reading time.
Exactly that. Also because and that's a little bit of a philosophical thought of myself. I like the idea of sweeping hands, where you kind of get pointed in the direction of the right time, and you can see where the time has been and where it's going. As with a digital watch, it just tells you what it is, and the cold hard facts. I like the poetry and the thought that you can have with a lovely piece like you're wearing. So we need to educate.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit business. And one of the news that came in the business watchmaking sphere was finally the sale of Baume Mercier.
Finally, the sale of Baume Mercier. That's an interesting choice of words.
We've been talking about that. I mean, it's been talked about since years and years and years.
Because they were so invisible.
Yeah. I mean, one has to remember that Baume Mercier was part of a kind of a package when the Richemont Group at the time bought
It's the
Piaget.
original package.
Yeah, it is the original package indeed. And Baume came along. And in a certain way, you could feel that maybe Baume wasn't, as sexy indeed as some of the other brands from the Richemont Group. So it got a little bit left on the side, and it's been complicated for Baume to develop itself within this environment.
To really find its space in the watch universe, which I always found a little bit sad for a couple of reasons. Is that first of all, they have been around since 1830. Yeah. Genevan Maison. My first serious watch, people hate it when I say that, my first serious watch, but it was my first expensive watch. It was the first watch that I thought, oh my Lord, what have I done? I have spent way too much money on a watch. That was a Baume Mercier, a Formula One chronograph. We'll go back to Formula One later, when they still had the money to sponsor Formula One or use the name. So I think that when you have an experience like that with a brand, it kind of sticks with you. So over time, I grew more and more disappointed, and then every now and again a nice Clifton came out or something or what have you, but. It was. They were so quiet. They were so. I saw them once a year at a certain point during the Geneva show, and then that was it. I always thought they could rival Longines.
Absolutely.
Given the history and.
I think one of the problems is that being part of the Richemont Group, they were asked to up their game in a certain way, and that merely reflected by increasing their prices and not necessarily changing too much of the watch itself. So it got a little bit disconnected to the reality of the market, whereas indeed Longines stayed pretty, stayed in its position.
They're comfortable in their range, and they're doing good stuff. And they move up a little bit. I think every brand slowly moves up. It was almost inevitable.
But when you see in Switzerland, there's a lot of discussions about the problem that the production volumes are really going down. Because indeed prices have risen quite a lot, and you do need to have those brands that are kind of mid-market brands, but that have nonetheless enough prestige to carry this kind of Swissness to it. But if you go too much too high in the prices, then you really disconnect with the special markets.
Yeah, I think these are a gateway. They are a gateway to Swiss watchmaking at an even higher level. And I also think that then we touch the subject of education again. If you start by buying an AP or a Rolex, you're already at a certain level. If you buy a Baume or a Hamilton, a mechanical Hamilton or whatever, then you probably have become fascinated by watches and watchmaking. Then you decide you want to spend some money maybe on it. You're probably maybe in your 20s or something, and then you buy your way into your first, and you get into the realm of watches, and then you continue to grow and learn and maybe make a little bit more money, and then you spend a little bit more, etc., etc. I think those brands are also have a value in that sense.
Ah, totally. Yeah.
That they welcome people in this universe, and they start with the Baume Formula 1 and they end with a, well, I don't know where I will end, but I think yeah.
And I remember Baume coming up with sometimes minute repeaters and things like that. I think
perpetual calendars.
Yeah. Well, I don't really understand the point of those watches at the time. I mean, and I think it was maybe a little bit defocusing the part of the Baume Mercier team, on doing maybe sexier watches in a certain way, but not being true with again what the market needs.
The sad thing with those hero pieces that they then showed during Watches and Wonders, they were actually really, really nice.
Absolutely.
Then you saw there was a Riviera perpetual calendar with a salmon dial, I think, and then they show you that, and it's exquisite and it's limited edition, and these are the normal versions, and then you saw something that was clunky and just not sophisticated, and but maybe in the new configuration with Italian owners who have great experience with the brand. In Italy, they're still strong. Italy is, of course, a very passionate watch market. Maybe they can find what's it called? Sprezzatura. Maybe instead of Genève and Joie de Vivre, they will get the Italian Sprezzatura. Maybe it will bring the brand back to.
We can only wish that.
I hope so. I really hope so.
But indeed, I mean, this is something that has been long in the making, because I mean, it's been years and years that there were rumors about the fact that indeed Richemont didn't know more way. I mean, they wanted to, not when I say get rid of it, I mean it sounds a little bit harsh, but there were indeed long time rumors about this, and now it finally happened. So we'll see if it's going to stop there.
Finding a better owner.
They
had a puppy, but that puppy just didn't fit the whole Richemont kennel, and then they found new owners who.
And I don't think we need to come back on the Baume adventure either. Remember that?
I do remember that, and I didn't understand it then, and I still don't understand it, and I think the Baume adventure is something for the history books. Those history books are probably in the back shelf.
Exactly. So now we're going to talk about another subject, because there's been an evolution within the world of certification.
Favorite topic.
Favorite topic, yeah. But I will just quickly take this opportunity before we talk about this to say that we're going to introduce somebody new on Watches TV that is going to take a little bit over a few things from me, which is a good thing. So let's meet this person. So yes, as mentioned, I'm really occupied with another project called Horrorpedia, and we'll get back on this really shortly. Reason why I'm extremely happy to introduce you Lara Poppy, who will join us, and you will see her much more often. So Lara, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. Well, I was born and raised in Geneva here in Switzerland, and I grew up in this industry, so it's always thrilling to get to talk about watches and people in the watch industry, and now to talk to everybody on Watches TV about these. So I'm very excited to share a passion with many, many watch enthusiasts that you've gathered over the years.
Thank you so much. Well, that's really great. And I mean, within the industry, as you mentioned, I mean, people know you. I mean, I've seen you quite often. You're one of the organizers of the Geneva Watch Days, for instance. And, so you know quite a lot of people within this community.
You're making me blush. I've luckily had the chance to, again, grow up around all these people that shape the watch industry today, and working on projects like the Geneva Watch Days or alongside different industry leaders. It's just been an absolute pleasure to learn amongst them, and now to be able to share everything that I've learned or get to still learn around these people and with you.
Excellent. Well, really looking forward having her more on the screen, and we'll explain very shortly a little bit the reason why I'm not pulling out, but I mean, I have to focus on some other priorities. So thank you, Lara, and welcome. and I hope you will enjoy everything that is that is coming up. All right.
Thank you. I'm sure I will.
All right, we're back, and I hope everything is going to work out fine with Lara and that you're going to enjoy her. Anyhow, let's talk certification.
Yeah,
Before, for a long time, the COSC here in Switzerland, in Neuchâtel, had some kind of monopoly in a certain way in the world of chronometer certification.
Yeah.
But a chronometer certification is just the application of an ISO norm, but nonetheless, COSC was kind of perceived as being okay. Well, it's COSC certified.
It has meaning.
Yeah, but at the time it was taking care of all the Omegas, all the Rolex, and things like that. So big volumes, but all these brands have now kind of internalized, if we can say so. I mean, it's a little bit summarized some of this certification process. So obviously less volume, and they had to reinvent a little bit themselves and coming up now with bit stricter definition of what their certification is all about.
Yeah, the excellence chronometer instead of the certified chronometer. Yeah, well, I think maybe you can blame Omega for starting with the MITAS certification. Which is everything's stricter and
that was about 10 years ago, no?
Yeah,
when they started
something like that.
Yeah,
and they're very. I think is every Omega now a
I don't think
MITAS?
so.
No,
I don't think so. No.
Because I know that Breitling always claims that every Breitling is a COSC certified chronometer, and I think most of the I think MITAS is going to be 100% for Omega in the long run. I think that's probably what they.
You have a few Tudor that are.
And Tudor then, which was also there was a lot of debate about that. Why did they do that? Is that to spike Omega? Because Rolex is obviously not going to do it. Is this a sign that Tudor wants to compete with Omega? But there's just a handful of Tudors that have that certification. And maybe COSC felt left out and thought we need to up our game, we need to offer something, and then they came up with the excellence chronometer.
Yes. Yeah. So before it was you had a plus or minus 10-second deviation per day allowed for this certification, and now it's been reduced to 6 seconds.
Yeah, that's a huge. Every second counts, and we should never forget that in the end, ultimate accuracy is the holy grail of watchmakers.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about. So I still think it's. I have no clue what the consumer will ultimately pay more, because you are going to pay more for your excellence chronometer. You can make sure about that. And again, it's about education. How many people care?
Yeah.
How many people care about the excellence chronometer? No, I don't want an officially certified chronometer. I want an excellence chronometer. I think there's education there maybe for COSC itself, but mainly for the brands, of course, to explain.
But it's true that I think the quest for precision is one that is really worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of effort, but ultimately I think, especially for instance in today's environment where you see other industries in other countries, I mean, trying to push up also their mechanical capabilities of producing watches. I think the fact of in Switzerland maintaining standards that should be really widely used by the industry, it's one differentiator that helps maintain again the perception of Switzerland as a source of excellence.
The whole the Swiss-made, Swissness, Swiss quality, etc., etc. Yeah, I think it has value.
Yeah.
And what I also suspect is that it's also maybe cleverly done with the because you could say, why? So you have you go from the 10 seconds to the 6 seconds, but I think MITAS is 4,
I think so. Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Why not try and beat MITAS? But maybe they think, we're going to work with movements that were not originally designed to be super movements, accurate movements, like Omega started developing movements that could actually reach that MITA certification. If we're going to work with Celita movements and other stuff, then we also need to take into consideration what that engine can actually how it can perform ultimately. So,
but it's interesting what you say indeed, because regarding all the Celita movements, I mean, they're used by so many brands, and we're talking
also
big
evolving,
volumes.
And they're evolving now. Recently, a new generation caliber came out from Celita, and they have been growing steadily, of course, and the quality. It's also nice to see the change in perception of a Celita movement. I don't even remember there was an engineer, IWC, way before the latest interpretation. They brought out a wonderfully slim, nice engineer. After they built all these big monsters, they were all in-house equipped, and they bought something that looked absolutely the part, nice and slim, and then it had a Celita inside, and it cost 6,000 euros or something. And people went absolutely berserk. That how could they do it? And I think maybe if IWC would do that again now, people would still go berserk. But I think the perception of Celita has changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot.
Well, it's a good thing. I mean, we know that
Absolutely.
Celita are doing things seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it also offers people a way in. A Celita movement opens doors.
So you were mentioning this watch. Actually, I have a little side story about it, because this one is Qualité Fleurier certified.
Speak about certification.
And that's really the most complicated certification process that exists. I mean, it's really very cumbersome, and that's why not that many brands are using it.
I think just one now.
Now I think it's only Chopin and LUC. And Parmigiani used to have it. I don't know if they still use it anymore.
No, I don't think
so. This is a Parmigiani. Anyhow, I had it tested. Okay, and it was tested by by Time Lab here in Geneva, another certification agency, if I can call it like this. So they took a picture of the watch. It was coupled with an atomic clock. And they said, "Oh, I'll come back in 24 hours and we'll see the deviation." And I came only 48 hours later, and I had worn the watch throughout those 48 hours. They put it back on. The girl looks at me very strangely, and it had taken 0.1 second in 48 hours.
It put the atomic clock to shame.
Exactly.
They had to recalibrate the atomic clock because they didn't. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So it just proves that indeed those type of certification, they do have some kind of purpose, and the brands that are using them are really, pushing to the limit. But what I wanted to say, I think, going back maybe a little bit more on the emotional aspect of it, when they gave me that results, it gave me goosebumps.
Yeah,
I was like, it's crazy that a mechanical object can reach that level of precision. That was absolutely insane. I was really emotionally struck by this performance.
I hope that more people feel that emotional thing when talking about chronometers. But it will definitely help. Because otherwise you take a chronometer certification for granted, and you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You should know the background of how important precision of time was and still is.
Still is. Absolutely. Okay, so let's be a bit more. Let's go more on the fun side.
I thought it was fun.
Okay, it was obviously fun. But
celebrations.
Celebrations, for instance. I mean, last year we had important.
Too many.
So many. Absolutely. It was just like absolutely crazy. One of the biggest one was obviously the 250th anniversary of Breguet, such an illustrious name, and I was personally happy to see that something happened.
Definitely.
Was,
I think all of us, who are interested in watches, were happy to see what was happening. Absolutely,
which was ultimately kind of rewarded by winning the Aiguille d'Or also at the GPHG. I mean, we saw other models that were really, really interesting. I really hope that they continue with this inertia, because for a while it was a little bit scary almost that there was not much happening. So within a rather short period of time, I mean, they definitely
well, they
moved
have
on
a new
quite
dynamic CEO, so that helps.
But that was last year.
That was last year.
That was last year. Yeah. Oh, talking still about last year, but it was. I mean, I like it when brands, they use birthday years that in a certain way are not. I don't see why they're so relevant. So it was the 270th anniversary of Vacheron Constantin. Okay, for me it's a date that doesn't necessarily require a special celebration, but nonetheless, the way they celebrated that was absolutely crazy.
That was mind-blowing.
That was the density of watches that they came up with last year was absolutely incredible. Without talking about the main, I mean, that clock was absolutely really something. Absolutely.
They're gonna show that at Watches and Wonders.
Oh, that's good. So good. Yeah. Oh, talking about Watches and Wonder. Before talking about the other anniversaries. So Watches and Wonders. I mean, the program is out there. There's going to be quite a lot of brands, newer brands. Audemars Piguet, we're going back inside also, which is a good thing, showing a sign of maybe unity within this industry. But there's going to be so many other events going around. The main event is going to be incredibly dense. So if you can come around mid-April, I think you'll be pleased if you like to see many watches.
Yeah, everywhere in the city, around Paul Expo, it's it's everywhere. Time is everywhere. Watches are everywhere. Absolutely.
And I think something that is important is that indeed we see other places, other venues that are pushing, that there's a bit more competition, I would say, out there. One of the best examples is obviously the success of the Dubai Watch Week, which is organized by the Siddiqui and, just as a quickly side note, Majid Siddiqui, the founder of the Siddiqui, passed away recently, but the legacy that he leaves and with the rest of his family still at the helm of the company is quite impressive. And indeed, last year, the Dubai Watch Week was something absolutely incredibly spectacular. And Geneva, my point is that we need to learn from that and we need to adapt. If we don't adapt, I mean, it's not that, I mean, Geneva is obviously, should remain the center point in a certain way, but we have to make things evolve and make it a little bit more, friendly, user-friendly, I don't know, more casual, more, I mean, it has to be an inspiring week.
But they're very different.
Absolutely,
different events, which is also, I think, is good, where you have Geneva Watch Days, which is a certain informal meeting.
Casual,
sort of a casual thing. Then you have, obviously, the Dubai Watch Week, which is very, you could say, consumer oriented, but then it's very collector oriented. But it's also informal, but then at a level of not if you're buying your first Baume, then Dubai Watch Week is maybe not. It's maybe not this year. Then
there were nonetheless some brands participating that had very mid,
which is also
entry
good.
Prices. Yeah.
But and then of course Watches and Wonders. It's you. Rolex is never going to do a little informal get together, and I'm suspecting Patek also won't do it. So that's more your traditional fair situation.
Rolex is participating at Dubai Watch Week since the start. They have a nice open booth over there. But as you said, it's a little bit more consumer oriented. Whereas historically speaking, the Watches and Wonders,
press.
It was press, trade.
So they already opened it more, which is good, and I think it's super important that they try and get people involved, and also, as a journalist, you go there to get the news. And there's so much going on, the lab, but you just don't have the time for that.
It's complicated.
And that's the keynote speakers. And I think as a whole, if you want to do everything, you should be there for 2 weeks, which is impossible. But now with 60 plus brands, but luckily as a consumer, you go there with a different mindset. You don't necessarily have to speak to that person or that person. That you can just. explore and experience. So I think that's good. And now with the city more involved, because as of late everything was just concentrated in that shoebox near the airport, and now at least something happens in the city as well, which is also good for the city.
Absolutely.
Geneva needs a boost as
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think it's going in the right direction for sure.
Yeah.
So let's go back on the anniversary.
Oh, anniversaries.
So this year we have a few,
Yeah.
and, some pretty big ones.
There's some pretty big ones. Let's start with the 100 years of Tudor, which is something. Originally designed to as the shield to guard the crown, but nowadays also fighting its own battles. I think. So that's interesting. I'm very curious to see how they are going to celebrate that. Because it was put in the market as a more affordable option, but with the same Rolex quality, although with a few different characteristics. I'm not allowed to say it was the poor man's Rolex because people get nuts when they had trouble with that. But now it's its own thing.
Yeah, it's a brand of its own. That's for sure. Yeah.
And it's clever that they kind of what Rolex never does is do retro models of their success stories, and then now Tudor explores the vintage catalog of Rolex, which is nice. But at the same time, they also do plenty of modern stuff with the Pelagos and the carbon fiber models. So I'm curious to see how they are going to celebrate it, and I'm quite sure that they will find something nice.
I'm pretty sure too.
Yeah.
So half a century celebration for one of the icons, obviously.
Yeah, it's the year of the Nautilus. Yeah. Now what?
Now what?
That's the whole thing. Yeah. Now what do you do? You discontinue the 5711 because it just grew out of hand. It was just out of control. No matter what Mr. Stern did, it just became this uncontrollable beast. The Cubitus comes, which I think satisfied a lot of people. And of course there is the 5811 in white gold, but I've never seen one in the wild. The production must be extremely limited, and now you have a celebration of an absolute icon, but also of a monster that is untamable. Now what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're not going to see, for the 50th of the Royal Oak, fireworks. That's what,
And there you also, and I don't expect that.
No, I don't expect that either.
I don't expect a 5811 1A.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, they could launch it, and then what? They could price it at 110,000 euros or 100.
And it would go. Absolutely.
And it will go.
Yeah.
But that's very bad for the rest of the collection. Then what do you do? Do you do everything in platinum with the baguette indexes? That's also a bit weird. Or do you come with something new? Do you have a 5911? I wouldn't be. I don't want to trade places with Mrs. Stern when it comes to taking a decision on this. Or you could also think, 50. You never wear a Nautilus for yourself. You wear it for 4 generations ahead. You know what? I'm gonna wait until it turns 100, and I'm not around anymore, and then
that could well happen.
Just let it go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They will print stickers. You get the note. It will be the most expensive sticker in the world.
That's for sure. All right, let's talk about something a bit light now. And we've just heard of a new sponsorship deal with Breitling.
Yeah, Breitling.
And Formula One. Aston Martin, to be more precise.
Yeah, we could say that is Breitling the most ambitious watch brand today? It certainly seems the hardest working watch brand of the day. They have the big NFL deal.
That was a big one.
It's a big deal. We don't see it we don't observe it that closely here in Europe. I would say.
But that's a big
deal.
Yeah, serious investments being made with that. I mean, because obviously, you have the sponsorship deal, but then afterwards you need to activated.
Yeah.
And if we go back to Formula One and Aston Martin, before,
Yeah.
I mean, Gérard Perregaux used to enjoy partnering the deal
Yeah.
with them, but I mean, it kind
And
of...
they never were in Formula One.
Yeah.
There were Formula One drivers wearing a Breitling, but this is the first time the Breitling logo appears on a car, and they're being their official timekeeper of the Aston Martin team, which has a longer name that I forgot.
Yeah. But I mean, that again, I mean, it's quite a statement by Breitling. We mentioned NFL. I mean, those are big budgets to activate big budget. Formula One, same thing. I'm sure they're not going to just put a sticker, and they will probably do quite a lot of things with that. But that all comes at, I mean, it's immense cost.
There is rumor that George Kern is going to be the second driver for the team as soon as one. No, that's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true.
Well, he might have liked that. He might have liked that. Yeah. But indeed, yeah. So it's they came up with this limited edition, if we can say so.
Yeah, if you
because we're talking
1957 pieces, if I'm correct, linked to a year Aston Martin was active or founded. No, not founded. Anyway, it
entered the race scene or something like
exactly.
that.
We've seen brands come into Formula One and leave because of the cost. I always liked Oris with Williams, but it's just very expensive. And even the Rolex at a certain point, when they had to renegotiate the deal, they were completely outbid by LVMH, and they thought, okay, well, let's not do it. I found it. They obviously did their research, and Formula One is the way to go for Breitling. Well, I kind of get it with NFL. It's a mass. You go for a mass appeal. Let's see, and I hope for Breitling that Aston Martin performs, because that's also the thing.
That is
right?
indeed a serious issue. I mean, if you don't perform, you look kind of bad in a certain way.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many uncertainties with this new season and the new regulations in place.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, they have a lot of talent, brain power within this team, but if it will translate into results, that's another thing. Yeah, but indeed, partnership between watch brands and Formula One have been going on for years and years and years.
And there always should be. I mean, the worlds are the same. It's the great stories of the past. Of course.
And you were mentioning Rolex, but I mean, when they pulled out, they kind of stayed a little bit, coming back to
they have Tudor,
which is still one of the big sponsor of Racing Bull.
They're Racing Bulls.
And we have H. Moser with Alpine. Alpine.
That's also
and obviously Richard Mille all over the place. And IWC. I mean, there's a lot of them.
And IWC did a clever thing as well. They also kind of turned their sponsorship into a movie. And there's talk of a second movie.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, apparently that was a huge success.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably, commercially speaking, I mean, in terms of advertising value that they got out of this experience, probably not too bad.
And it's also a first, I think, that you have a watch dedicated to a Formula One team that doesn't exist but exists in a movie. So there is this. It's so incredibly meta. I like it. I like it.
Well, on these good meta words, we'll, I guess, end it here. Thank you so much, Lex, for dropping by.
My pleasure.
And looking forward to seeing you in another watch venue somewhere. But for sure in Geneva. Well, thanks for watching. See you real soon. And, well, viva watchmaking and viva the whole thing. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.